When I started doing 54 minutes live with insert name of legend here, there was a couple guys that I had in mind that were idols of mine, heroes of my generation, really. And like I said, when I talked to Jim Sarek and Joe Bucher, when the history of musky fishing is written many years from now, it's going to go through Musky Hunter magazine. And when I posted a thumbnail or a picture of tonight's guest, I said he's one of the big three of Musky Hunter magazine. And it's none other than Steve Heiting. He may have not been as out there in front of the magazine as Joe was and Jim, but he certainly had a big hand in the backside of the magazine. And that's where we're going to start our conversation with Steve, because I have a shared love of journalism. In so much as I started writing for Hook magazine in Canada, started writing for Musky Hunter magazine after the changeover when Greg and Tony bought it while Steve was still editor. But Steve, welcome to 54 Minutes. And let's start with, what are your memories of your first couple articles? Because reading some of the information on you, that's kind of where you started.
My first couple articles. How far back do you want to go? A lot of writers get their start, with smaller publications and work their way up. The first article I ever sold was to Outdoor Life magazine. So I started at the top and maybe I worked my way down. I don't know. But if you're talking muskies, the first article I had in Musky Hunter was just an absolute thrill. I wasn't working full time for the magazine yet at that point, but to be published in Musky Hunter was really, really cool. And a couple of years later, I was working for them, and I thought that was great too.
You guys created something in those early days of Musky Hunter, and when I spoke with Joe, he was so open about the history, and it proved super popular with our audience. Everybody liked that history lesson. And if I kind of paraphrase Joe, he said that he reached out to you guys and kind of pulled you guys into what it was he was doing. What was your early recollections of, how the magazine grew even before you were there, but as it started to grow and gain traction? Like, what do you remember of that time frame, Steve?
Well, I remember Joe making the announcement that he was starting the magazine at the National Championship Muskie Open in Eagle River, which is the biggest tournament in the world. Now I MC that, but Joe was MCing it back then. And I believe that was 1988. And he was talking about starting this magazine for muskie fishing. And I was working for a newspaper at the time. I had 9 years in newspapers before I got into the magazine business. And I went up and talked to Joe afterward, introduced myself, and said, "Hey, who's going to edit it for you?" Looking for a better job. The newspapers are newspapers. And Joe said, "I'm going to be doing it." And I thought, you got a TV show, you got a guide business, you've got a lure business, and how are you going to find the time to edit? But he did a great job to get that magazine going. And when his TV show took off, well, then Jim got promoted to editor, and then there was when the magazine was sold to Willow Creek Press. Well, they needed somebody to run it, and so I got hired away from. I was working for a magazine in the meantime between my newspaper and going to work for Muskie, and I worked for a magazine called Wisconsin Outdoor Journal, which at the time was the biggest four-color magazine in the state. Covering the Wisconsin outdoors. And then I got hired away from them by Musky Hunter, and that started November 2nd, 1994. And it was a dream ride. I mean, there were some mornings, it's like any job. There were some days you could have it. Like the time that, excuse me, my layout program froze up. I shut down at about 5:30 on Friday. Everything was fine. And I opened up the layout for the next issue of the magazine at about 8:45 on Monday morning, and the layout program was, I don't know what happened to it. It just would not open, and the file was dead, and had to rebuild the whole magazine in about 3 days, which was hellacious. And like I said, you could have had the job at that point. I'd have given it away gladly, but no, I stuck with it, and it was a lot of fun. Most mornings I went to work, just kind of thinking, this is the greatest job in the world, and I had it.
We're a couple questions there. Did you have a journalism background before doing this writing, or was writing just something that came natural outside of, not having formal training on that?
No, I went to college for journalism. I have a degree in communication with a print journalism emphasis, and I wanted to be a sports editor for a daily newspaper and achieved that right away, and did very well there. And but it was a night, we published in the morning, so we worked at night, and that gave me my days free to do what I wanted to do. And I started guiding at that point and started freelance writing at that point, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
So when you started doing some stuff with Musky Hunter magazine, you were doing some guiding, you were into musky fishing at that point. Like that was obviously again just a natural, easy progression for you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because I think for a lot of people, when they look back at those early years of Muskie Hunter, it almost, from my vantage point, it felt like you guys were like the Three Musketeers. Like I knew Muskie Hunter when it was the three of you guys kind of were the names associated with it. So I think a lot of people look at it as it was like that three-man show, even though I know that's not true. And it feels like you guys were just, thrown together, and it was like that perfect, storm of things that worked. But all those years that you guys were working on that and you were the editor, what changes, challenges, happened along the way? And, slowly fast forward to, when the magazine got sold in 2018, did you see those changes coming, Steve? Like, was there signs that things were about to do this monumental shift to digital media?
Well, yes, you asked about changes earlier. Um, the magazine grew rapidly. The sport of musky fishing grew so quickly, and being part of that, it was kind of like riding a surfboard. It was just so cool to be at the crest of that as it was going. Um, and we had some competition, and competition is what it is. It makes you better, and in the end, we were still there. They weren't. Um, and we worked hard. It forced us. I remember some of the meetings with Jim and some of the meetings we had with some people who were helping us design, come up with ideas on how to, kind of give the magazine a facelift at that time. Um, very, we worked hard to do that because it was legitimate competition at the time, and we worked hard, and it went very well. And 2008 was kind of like a strange time, because things were really, really strong prior to 2008. In that recession in 2008, they call it the Great Recession. The boating industry felt it, the magazine industry felt it. Some of the artists, we always had art on the cover of Muskie Hunter, and some of the artists really felt it. People just changed their spending at that point. Um, but the magazine, we still did very well. And yeah, in about the mid 20 teens, that's when you started to see the digital thing come on. Um, we had always been trying to be at the forefront of the digital thing. We had the first Muskie only website back in 1995. I know Jim talked with you about our message board kind of being a wild, wild west at the time. And that was kind of hard to get control of at the time, back then. But we did. And it just, everything just kind of evolved. Then, of course, you get social media, and people started relying on social media for more information. And, social media is a really good thing. You can share so many ideas. You can connect with so many friends, people that you knew previously. And I've been able to reconnect with a lot of high school friends, which is awesome about social media. But the one thing I don't like about social media is how quickly a fishery can get abused. Um, with the internet and people willing to talk about what they're doing, some lake I've seen every single lake I've ever thought I've ever fished or I've thought about fishing has been discussed somewhere on the internet at some point. And we're talking 40-acre potholes in the UP of Michigan. For a while there, I was trying to find that pot of gold where there was a population of big dumb fish, and I found a lot of populations of dumb fish, but nothing really big. Not that I don't really spend the time up there like I used to anymore, but I mean, 40-acre potholes, and people are talking about it on the internet. And I think people have the perception that they're just talking like you and I are talking right now, but out in the world, people listening, I don't know how many people are tuned into this right now, but people are certainly using the internet, using social media to gather information on places to go fishing. And 40-acre lake, excuse me, can't take that kind of just can't get that kind of abuse that's going to come from being well known. And then of course, in the 2000 teens with the digital thing with digital magazines, we had a digital edition of Musky Hunter that just never really took off. It was the same issue as the print issue, but people really liked musky fishermen really seemed to like the print edition, to have something in their hands. And the subscriber numbers kind of flatlined, but when Tony and Greg bought it in 2018, it was still very profitable, and there was no reason to think that 4.5 years later it'd be gone, but now it is.
Yeah. I want to back up there that you said something that's always intrigued me with the classic editions of Musky Hunter prior to Greg and Tony, and that's the cover art. Was that a decision? What was the decision behind that? Because I have my theories, but it was something that set Musky Hunter apart from a lot of magazines that look for a cover photo. When I write for Hook magazine, they're always like, we have parameters for the cover photo. They're always looking for something different. What was the thought process behind it? Because again, I think that's something that really set that magazine apart from a lot of the other ones.
I wasn't part of the magazine at the time when they started up, in 1989. So I can't tell you what Joe's thought process was at the time, but at that time I was editor of Wisconsin Outdoor Journal, and or starting in 1991, I was editor of Wisconsin Outdoor Journal, but I was freelancing for Outdoor Journal at that time. That publication always had wildlife art on the cover, and the idea there was to set it apart in the newsstand. You'd look at a newsstand and there'd be 100 different titles up there, and all had a photograph on the cover. But we had art. The Outdoor Journal had art. Musky Hunter had art, and that always had a different look. And so people looking at a newsstand looking for a magazine, their eyes kind of naturally went to that, and that may have been what they were trying to accomplish. But I don't know. It also I thought it gave it a certain class too. That
Yes.
I really enjoyed it. I love working with the artists. Artists can be kind of quirky, but so what? I'm kind of quirky myself, and talking with the artists, trying to get the cover art done. It was always a good time. Made some good friendships there, and I thought we had a very classy looking magazine.
I would totally echo that. I always thought that it did pop off the shelf, and it did have a different look. That, yeah, you're right, it did look classy. It just had something different about it that stood out. And it's always kind of bugged me. On I should have asked Joe about that, because I'm sure you're right. It's for, a number of reasons. The one thing I always thought was, there's as soon as you put photographs on the cover, there's competition, and you're bringing in artificial competition or ego on who's going to be the cover art this month. And I don't know if that's true or not true. I've had a couple cover arts now, I think, with Hooked magazine. And yeah, those are great moments. And you remember your first one or two, but that's not to say that it's not always cool, but it's not something that you have to strive for. I just think that sometimes just adding that competition maybe isn't the right thing. So I always just thought that was really cool. When when it led up to the point where you guys knew that Jim was selling the magazine, I know you stayed on after the transition. What was your thought process there when Jim was selling, and, what was your agreement or deal, without getting into any specifics on, were you there to help the transition, or was that just something you did on your own? What was going through your head at that time, Steve?
Well, I was kind of surprised that Tony and Greg were going to buy it because, they'd never been in publishing before. They'd written for the magazine, but that's a whole different thing from publishing a magazine. Um, we should back up though. Jim did offer it to me,
Okay.
and I looked at it very seriously. As I said, it was still profitable. I had a partner, a guy who is very good with money and has some experience selling advertising. Good friend of mine, fish with him every year. We're still good friends. He wanted a 10-year commitment. And at the time, that was 2017, we were looking at that. I was 57 years old. I didn't want to commit to working for 10 more years. I was thinking, possibly retiring when I was 62 or 63. And that's what I wanted to do. Um, had Jim held on to it and he wanted to keep me, working for him, I probably would have done it because, Jim's a great friend. He was a great boss, best boss I ever had. And it's not often you can say that you had a boss who was a friend, but I did. And that was a good thing. When Tony and Greg were, well, I should back up. There were two things that kind of had me concerned, and one was the 10-year commitment my partner wanted. The other thing was just seeing what the digital thing was, and that other magazines are struggling, much larger magazines than us are struggling to figure it out. I thought, okay, if they can't figure it out, how's Musky Hunter going to do it? And so that was in the back of my mind, and I didn't want that to be my legacy, that I was the guy who was in charge of the magazine when it went belly up, if that were to happen. That was in the back of my mind. But then when Jim told me that he was going to sell it to Tony and Greg, he also told me that they weren't going to buy it if I didn't come on board. And in order to be fair to Jim, I turned him down. And I couldn't say, well, I'm not going to go work for Tony and Greg and block a sale for Jim. That wouldn't be fair to Jim either. I promised Tony and Greg I'd work for them for 3.5 years till I was 62, and I did that. But I made them well aware of when I turned 62, I was out, and that's what I did. I did have a job opportunity with another magazine that approached me. Oh, I think they owned it about 4 months, and another magazine approached me. It was a pretty good gig, and I turned it down just because I had made a commitment, and Musky Hunter was great, and I wanted to see it through, and that's what happened.
When Greg and Tony took it over, and we're not here to debate what led to the downfall. I think there's a number of things there that led to the downfall of Muskie Hunter, but the more important thing is they changed the style of the magazine. They brought in a lot of writers from a lot of areas, me included. I did have some writing experience with, again, like Hook Magazine up here,
Yeah.
and I was using, or one of my really good friends, mutual friend of ours, Kevin Wagner, was doing a lot of proofreading for me and editing my articles. So I was learning quite a bit as we went. And I remember I sent an article into you for Muskie Hunter, and we chatted, and I think I still have the email somewhere. And you were like, "Yeah, this article is good, your writing's good." And we got into a discussion about a few of the other things that were coming in the magazine, and one thing really stood out at me, and it's not to shoot anybody down because we were young, we are learning, and you had said, "This has substance." I'm just looking through an article, I'm just kind of paraphrasing, where the author thinks that a lure is a pattern, and it stuck with me, and it was true. There was a lot of people that were coming in writing stuff that it wasn't what Muskie Hunter was. And again, it's not to blame anybody. I just think that muskie hunter was such a vital piece of musky fishing. It was the news. It was the like it was that every 2 month newsletter that everybody looked forward to. It's where you got the big stories. And I'll say the same thing I said to Jim and probably to Joe. You guys had authority in that space. And I've said it on a lot of my videos. I've been open on podcasts that I've been on. When Muskie Hunter sold in 2018 and then COVID hit, there was this monumental change in the industry. Everything went to digital and everybody started a YouTube channel or started doing some type of content. And we're on the other side of it now. It's starting to, I'd say, maybe level out, even though everybody's got a GoPro in their boat. But I think the good stuff's starting to rise to the top, but there's still this huge hole left that was Muskie Hunter magazine and what you guys accomplished with it, even outside of the magazine with Jim's TV show and the schools that you guys did. I think even though you're still doing that, there was so much around the magazine. Talk to that a little bit, Steve, on what you feel, is missing now that that classic part of that magazine isn't there. And I'll just add one more thing. Guys like Jeff Weedman, he says a lot. He's like, things are trying to replace what Muskie Hunter was, like podcasts and some videos, but nothing's really kind of found that home. Is that fair to say?
Um, boy, yeah, there is no one central place like Muskie Hunter anymore for information. Um, there's a lot of different YouTube videos you can watch, but really, there is nothing right now out there that really can replace it. Maybe Muskie Insider, which is a newsletter.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it would take, well, I don't want to get into that, what it would take them to do it, because they've got their own way of doing it, and I'm not criticizing, not going to give
Mhm.
advice. Um, but they do seem to have a pretty good following, which is great. One thing that is hurting the industry right now is there's really no place for anybody to advertise. You can advertise on Facebook, and what good is that? I've done a lot of advertising on Facebook, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I question the numbers that they say that you're seeing, or that people are seeing seeing the ad. I mean, you look at it and go, no, I don't think so.
Mhm.
Typically we'd see more response. Um, but we can we can question Facebook all we want and not get anywhere. Um, but I hear it all the time from the small manufacturers, the guys who used to advertise in Muskie Hunter. Here was a publication that they could afford to be in. It hit a targeted audience, and they did very well with their advertising there. And they just don't have that now. And there's a lot of guys who are frustrated by it. And they try advertising social media. Some guys do kind of well, some not so much. Um, the shows, sports shows, they're kind of going away, and I think that kind of has something to do with COVID. People learn to shop online, but the sports shows used to be a good place to get a lot of information. Had some really good, fantastic speakers back in the day, and you just don't see the attendance at them anymore. So I don't know what it's going to be, but our industry needs something right now. Needs something to step to the forefront. And I wish it was still Muskie Hunter, but it's not.
Yeah, I agree. We were just down at the Milwaukee show. Actually, I ran into you there briefly, and we had only went for a little bit on Friday and the Saturday. It was a whirlwind, talking to as many people as we could, but attendance was way down. There's no
Mm.
denying it. Um, it's a broader issue in the industry, and a lot of people have talked about it. Just to the Muskie Insider, I do think that is becoming one of the the hubs of where a lot of people are starting to go to. So I do think that they are kind of getting it with the newsletter being free. Everybody's getting that. They're starting to get some information there. They can subscribe, or at least they have somewhere to go where they can get those bullet points of information, and then they can search that out a little bit more if they want. One thing on the advertising side, Steve, which again it intrigues me, and it's somewhere I want to take this conversation with you because of your loyalty with the companies you've worked for. But when you're looking at some of these smaller manufacturers that would obviously, buy ads in Musky Hunter, is that why we're seeing a lot of these smaller companies try to get lures or gear into the hands of some of the, just say, content creators, whether it's YouTube or any other social media? And it just, to me, it seems like there's this just rash of everybody's a pro staff right now, and every little basement company has 5 or 6 quote unquote pro staffers, and to me it feels like it's dumbed that word down, and everybody thinks they're a pro when that's not what pro staff means. And it is that, am I making this up in my head, or is this something that you're seeing as well?
Well, boy, I don't know what you asked asked there, Glenn, and I really don't know how to answer that. I limit, the companies I'm going to put my name with are going to be companies that have a reputation, um, and that's not saying that a new startup is got a bad reputation. I'm not saying that. Um, if they have to rely on getting baits in the hands of content creators or whatever to get the word out, well, they got to do that. So far as myself, everybody I work with is a very established company. It's all top quality. If I'm going to put my name on something, it's going to be top quality, and it's going to be people I know that I'm not going to get burned by it sometime down the line either. So I don't really know how to answer that for you.
No, and that makes sense, because I was gonna ask you specifically because of your long-standing connections with the shirt you're wearing, Maps. As long as I've ever been in musky fishing and known your name, that's the first thing I associate with you is Maps. The article or the advertising in Musky Hunter magazine was a picture of you. It's that loyalty that you have with those brands, with St. Croix, and that you had with Ranger earlier on until the changes at Ranger. To me, that really speaks of a character like yourself, and the character you have to have loyalty with those companies, and that's just not something that I see in today's world, and I'm guilty of it too, because early on I wanted to say yes to everything. And again, my good buddy Kevin Wegner would tell me, as soon as you say yes to this, you're saying no to all of those. And
Mhm.
it takes a bit to get past that. And now I'm at the point too where I want to work with the bigger companies, the well-established companies, the companies that aren't going to get upset because somebody said something on some corner of social media that really has nothing to do with anything. But the smaller builders, that could make or break, some of these smaller builders. So for me, I'm at the point where I want to work with those well-established companies. So being somebody who's got the reputation of these long-standing relationships, what's your advice for newer anglers as they're starting to come into this industry? And I feel like it's a it's a tough time right now to get into this industry and really gain traction and try and make a name for yourself outside of just some flamboyant figure eight content, which almost anybody can produce today, to actually build a following and a bit of a reputation. It takes a lot more right now, I feel. What does Steve Heiting tell the next, generation coming in on how to try and get noticed, and and make a lasting impression, something that's, that's going to stand the test of time, like yourself, like Jim, like Joe.
First and foremost, be a pro. And there's a lot of interpretations of what a pro can be, but you know, one of the companies I work with, the guy who used to be in charge of the pro staff, um, he would call me up whenever he was looking at, somebody applied and he was looking at adding them to the staff. And I wouldn't, I would always kind of tell him, hey, I'm not going to tell you who you should hire, who you shouldn't hire, or whatever, because that's not my business. It's your business. And we finally got down to the point that he would ask me, so could this guy possibly end up in a police lineup wearing my logo? And that kind of became a yes or no answer sometimes. And if I kind of hesitated, that was kind of a no for him too. When I was working for Musky Hunter, I knew pretty much everybody in the industry at that time, and you knew who the solid individuals were. You knew who was kind of sketchy, and you knew who to stay away from. And I just think if somebody really wants to build a reputation, they just got to be a pro. You can't be out there swearing. And I realize swearing is much more commonplace with a younger generation, but you just can't do that in public. If you want more people to recognize you as a pro, you can't be out there dropping F-bombs. You just can't do that.
No.
You can't be walking around with a beer in your hand at all times. And I got nothing against having a beer or having a glass, 2 fingers of whiskey before I go to bed. I have nothing against that. But being out in public and being sloshed, not good. And I could name hundreds of people, who, I'm not going to. But you just can't do that. And when it comes to working with companies, you've got to be professional. You have to earn your spot. Nobody's going to just give it to you because you catch some fish. There's a lot of people who can catch a lot of fish. And a lot of people can catch more fish than me, bigger fish than me. But if they aren't out there earning their keep, the company's not going to work with them because there are so many people coming at them. So you have to provide something that company needs, and that's exposure, professional exposure. You don't want to be the guy with somebody's logo on your chest in a police lineup. That's just not a good thing.
No, and I can speak to that just in the position I'm at. And I'm not going to compare myself to you or any of your peers, but the point where I'm at in my career and what we do with 54 Bust, I treat it I treat it as a business. I treat it as a brand that's bigger than me, and everybody that's part of my brand has to be on board with what it is we're doing, and we hold ourselves to a professional, level. And yeah, we swear in the boat. You lose a fish, you're going to say some stuff, but
Oh, I do
in
too.
yeah, and that's why there's editing. You take those out, like
Mhm.
people know what's happening, but you have to set an example for the next generation. Just like you set an example for my generation, I need to help set the example for that next generation. And to your point about the swearing and the carrying on, there is a recent video that was super popular and there was a lot of swearing in it. And it's otherwise amazing video. Some of the best work this person had probably put out in a long time. And I had people call me, text me, tell me, "Have you seen this? Have you seen this?" I'm like, "Yes, I have." They're like, "I was watching it with my 4-year-old son, and by the 7th F bomb, I had to turn it off." And I'm like, "It's so unfortunate because this could be the best content that this person's put out, but
Mhm.
it's just not. I don't know how companies can continue to work with people like that." And again, everybody's got a different baseline on where they feel, comfortable with it. But I do know for myself in the past, we've put some pictures out where we've had a beer in the boat or we've had, a fish that's bleeding more than it should. And when you're young and you don't understand what it takes to work with companies, like Red October, like Suic, you quickly learn. And now we always try to do better, and that's the example you guys set. And I would say, Steve, even though you might not feel it when I posted your name, a legend in the muskie industry, I think a lot of people tonight watching think that way because you guys led by example, and because you guys had, that character to do better when it was a time where you didn't really have to. You could do a lot of stuff because there wasn't a GoPro, there wasn't a camera, a phone in everybody's pocket. But, having integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And that's what Dave and I always say when we go sucker rigging in November up here and there's not another boat on any of the lakes close to us. We could get away with running an extra line, but we're like, if one person's seen us, everything that I've worked for to get to this point could be gone with that logo and a police lineup. Like,
Mhm.
again, how do you tell people to be professional but yet be themselves?
Well, to be themselves, you just relax, have fun. You're out there to have fun. That's why we fish muskies. I got into muskie fishing because I always wanted to catch a muskie when I was a kid, and I couldn't start fishing for them until I had a driver's license and could drive somewhere to go fishing for them. They just didn't exist in southeastern Wisconsin back then. I grew up in West Bend, north of Milwaukee, um, and so you know, it, I don't know. I can't. I don't know if I can really answer that for you.
It it is a tough one because our first couple years of putting the cameras up, we were reserved. We tried to check ourselves in the boat, and we didn't come across as authentic as we should. And as our channel grew a little bit and we got more comfortable doing it, we started to become more of ourselves, and the checking of the language, or saying everybody, you know how guys talk in a boat in between a fish getting caught, you say just some of the stupidest things. We've gotten better at that, but we've let our natural personalities come through, and that really wins people over because they see you as authentic and real. So that's really helped for us, just trying to be the same people we are away from the camera as we are on it. And I think, I look at some of the people in the industry today that do a really good job of that. And you meet them in person, you meet them at a show, and they're that person, really down to earth. But I also see a lot of people that you see them on camera and they feel like they're better than others, and then you meet them in real life and it feels like that. It feels like they have that, that aura around them, that they feel better. And when you've worked with some of the best companies, just one more thing on like the sponsorship stuff. When companies see people like that, what is their thought process? Like you said, your friend asking you to kind of vet some of these people out. How much goes into it, away from the fishing, away from the catching? Because to your point, anybody can catch fish in today's world.
Mhm. Well, anybody can catch fish. So if you don't have something to offer the company, why should they work with you? You have to, nowadays probably more so than ever because there's so many people out there coming to those companies with their hands out. You have to prove yourself and prove what you can do for those companies. Otherwise, you're just not going to get anywhere because they don't have to work with you. They can find somebody else who can catch fish. And as long as you know, as you said, you're yourself on camera. You come across as professional. You treat the companies professionally. You treat the average person that you meet at a sports show. You're at a sports show. Somebody comes up to you, sit and talk with them. They got a kid, talk to the kid for a while. Ask him if he's ever caught a fish, and if, see what his biggest fish is if he has. Make the kid feel good. This is all part of it because if somebody feels good about you, that company may feel good about you. If that company feels good about you, they're going to hire you. And if the consumer feels good about you and the company you're working with, then the company gets a sale, and then it all kind of snowballs and goes from there.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because we love going to the shows. We don't have a booth. We walk around, we talk to the companies that we work with, and so many people come up to us. And the first year we went to Minnesota, and I apologize for people watching that have heard this story like 10 times. We didn't know what to expect. We'd never been there as 54 Bust. We didn't even get into the building, and people were recognizing us from our videos, wanting to come up, tell us their stories. And Dave and I, that first year, it was overwhelming. Honestly, it was really overwhelming because we just see ourselves as we're just regular guys. I mean, we all are, but the way I look up to you and Jim and Joe, somebody out there might look up to us in a similar fashion.
Mhm.
Obviously not the same, but I well, Dave and I both made the conscious decision that we're like, we are going to talk to every single person that goes out of their way to talk to us. And that's to your point. And this year in Milwaukee, I I can't name the number of booths we were standing in front of, and people wanted to come up and talk to us. And we're going to talk about Suic Lures here in a minute because we both share an affinity and an affiliation with Suic. Yours a lot longer than mine, and that's not to your age, Steve. That's just to your length in the industry. But we were talking outside of the Suic booth. We were just chatting with Mike a little bit, and two guys come up to us and they asked if you guys could take home one lure from today. And that's a loaded question, and people know that. And I knew where Dave was going to go. So I said, well, I would probably take a 10-inch Red October monster tube, knowing that Dave's going to say probably a Franken Suic. And we're standing right in front of Michael Suick, and it's not us making that up. That's stuff that we actually talk about on our channel. People are asking, and then those folks are going to go in and buy that lure. Same thing with we're talking with Mark at Red October, and people are looking at stuff, and we're going to help them. I know that those things help. It helps us, helps the manufacturers, and we never got into this for free lures. Yes, I get a lot of stuff given to me free. I know you do too, Steve, but that's not why we do this. I think of it as I need to have a value proposition for the companies that far exceeds anything they could ever give to me. And that's the way I look at it. And I think there are some very good examples of younger guys getting into the industry that do that. And there's some examples that are not great. And we could debate that for 5 hours tonight. That's not going to get us anywhere. But as we transition this into talking about some tactics for muskies, when did you start doing the video? Because I love your little tips and tricks videos. I like that you didn't go to the sub 1 minute short style. You still keep it just long enough that there's a little bit of meat on the bone, but it's not a 15-minute watch for one tip. Like when did that start for you, Steve?
Well, I started doing videos. My first one was Muskies on the Move. I filmed that during the 2001 fishing season, and the first one was in VHS. Yes, it was. Um, and then after I sold out the VHS versions, then I did come out with that in DVD, and I produced counting that one, 5 DVDs over the years, and they were great. They were fun. I spent the money to do them right. Had a professional editor doing them. Um, hired good camera guys and did them right. They cost $7,000-8,000 to do. Back then. And you can do the math at figure out how much money you'd make. It was certainly profitable to do it. It was fun to do. I transitioned into the Musky tips. I didn't start doing it till 2022 when I was done with Musky Hunter. I retired from Musky Hunter April 1st, 2022. Um, and that first year was I wanted to do something different and have it on YouTube. Um, just simply because I was looking for the next thing. I was done being a magazine editor at that point. Let's do something else. And um, I found I really enjoyed filming musky fishing because I mean, for gosh sakes, when I'm editing, I'm watching the footage and I know the fish is going to strike and I'm setting the hook again. I catch myself doing that all the time. I love doing that and trying to help somebody learn to catch muskies is all I'm trying to do with that. And I look at YouTube not necessarily for entertainment. Personally, I don't look at it for entertainment. I look at it trying to figure something out. Okay, I don't know how to do this. Hopefully somebody else does. I'm sure somebody else does. Maybe they've got a video about it. Um, and then I started looking at a lot of YouTube videos, and the one I always keep coming back to was I had some raccoons in my backyard that were terrorizing my backyard, and they had to go, and they wouldn't go in a box trap. And the fact of the matter was, somebody must have trapped them in a box trap, brought them out to our neighborhood, and shared the wealth. And they had to go. And so I'm looking for a way to trap some nuisance raccoons. And there was a video, 15 minutes, about some kid and just blah 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 about how he trapped the world's smartest raccoon. And he had 14 raccoons in the backyard, and it was a fenced backyard with a couple big oak trees. And he was putting out little teeny tiny marshmallows leading into these box traps. And after 3 nights, he caught a little kit about that big. And so this is the world's smartest raccoon. Like, what about the other 12 you didn't get? And I thought, I watched this for 15 minutes. You just wasted 15 minutes of my life to watch this. And so I that's always in the back of my mind. And when I started my fishing videos, I wanted to keep them under 5 minutes because I wanted somebody to learn something quickly, be entertained, watch me catch a fish. Hopefully that entertains them, and then go away from it, and hopefully that they can take that and go out in the water and catch a fish. That's the whole plan, of doing my videos, and some of them to get the point across. I think sometimes I'm getting into 5.5 minutes sometimes, but I still try to edit them kind of tightly, going with voiceovers as we're fishing, things like that, just trying to keep them shorter. And I just want it to be a real quick, fun watch, and hopefully people learn something. That's
Well,
all I
I
want
think,
to do.
and I think you do a great job. You're clearly a natural teacher when it comes to that stuff. And for us, when we started to film, yeah, it's easy to film and just put your catch videos out there, but that gets old really quick. And we're seeing a big shift in what people expect out of YouTube, especially musky videos. The catch fest videos they're just not doing near as well. Yeah, you're going to get some viral moments with those amazing, couple things, but
Mm.
that doesn't build a following, that doesn't build a community. So we started to go almost as a natural progression of any of the writing I did do for the magazines, as here's, a whiteboard breakdown on our little Tykes board, and we draw out, the spots. And we didn't invent the whiteboard breakdown. I mean, it's been around for 100 years in sports, and guys like Jordan Weeks were doing it. There's a lot of guys that do it, but we always thought, let's share our experiences, be it what they may, to try and help other people understand what it was we were doing. Because to our point earlier, just saying it's a suic pattern, that's what you need. That doesn't help anybody. You need to teach like you guys are teaching. And I took inspiration from all of the videos I'd seen, prior, whether it was back on VHS or DVD. And like, you have to take all of that in and try and use what you can out of it. What I like about your short little video clips is that it's not it's not a long drawn out intro. you get into what it is you're doing, you show what it is you're going to do, and I can walk away with some value. And I think one thing that musky anglers are probably notoriously bad for is thinking that we know everything. And I think we've all been there at some point or another where it's like, oh, it's another video about, how to fish a suic. Like I've seen this a million times. When I watched the suic video you just posted just recently, yeah, I do pretty much the same things, and we'll talk about some of the Suic modifications because I think they are key. But just watching you in the boat with the way you rip the Suic, it's slightly different than me, and that for me, I was like, "Oh, I see something a little bit different there." So even in that, 5-minute video where you did what I expected you were going to do, I picked up on something that I'll remember now when I get back out on the water with Suix on this is what Steve was doing, slightly different. Let's practice this and see if that's something that will work for me. So I do think that those little tips and tricks are important. They're easy lifts for people to watch. They're easier for us to produce, and they're still fun to edit because I'm with you. I think the editing for me is probably as much fun or more fun than the actual catch. Obviously, you need catch footage to edit, but
Mhm.
when you get some multicam footage and you can edit it into a compelling story outside of just a catch, it's so fun. Is that part of it a passion for you as well, the editing side? There's or is that an extension of editing the magazine?
It probably is. That's a great question because I'm always looking. When I was editor or managing editor of Musky Hunter, I was always looking for something different to do with the magazine, a different way of doing a layout, just adding a drop shadow with text. Back in the day, um, I was always looking for that. Now I'm constantly looking to try to make my videos better. Um, Maybe I just need to be better looking. I don't know, but I'm always working at that. I'm always looking for tips on how to make something better, and I think I think that's a passion that's just connected to what I used to do with the mag. And this past week I've been working on a a deer hunting book. My deer camp has been around for more than 80 years, and we're going to try to. I shouldn't say try. We're going to publish our camp log in a book form,
Oh,
and
nice.
I've been putting that together. And I guess that they got the right guy for doing it because that's what I did. I've worked on I don't know how many books for Musky Hunter and put them together all the way through the printing process, so I know how to do this. And I just had a blast doing it this past week. And so I guess once an editor, always an editor.
That's interesting you say that. Like this deer that's behind me here that you can see, sorry, right there,
Mhm.
is it comes from like 300 yards behind our garage. We do quite a bit of deer hunting and moose hunting. My wife's got a couple really big moose, and I have gotten the opportunity to write about that with Hook magazine because we cover some of the outdoor stuff like that as well. And hunting is a big part of life for a lot of musky quote unquote hunters. And there's a really big crossover there. And you talk to guys like um his name's escaping me that he owned Chaos, Scafe's father-in-law,
Oh,
Rick.
Rick Elbers.
Rick Albers.
Yeah.
He's always I like hunting better than muskies. And I think that's not entirely true, but so many people are into hunting and especially people that appreciate the hunting aspect of hunting deer or moose or whatever it might be, that just lends itself right into musky fishing. And when you take somebody new out that's not a hunter and you tell them we're going to cast all day, we're going to have one or two shots at a fish, and they've just come from fishing for bluegills or walleyes or whatever it is, and it's like, you want me to do what? How many times have you seen that in your life, Steve? Because I mean, I've seen it a lot where even some of our close friends are like, I'm just not interested in going musky fishing with you guys. but the guys that are into hunting, they quickly
Well, yeah.
understand you know, that the thrill of that hunt and the catch.
Well, yeah, if you're a deer hunter, and I know there's guys who hunt, much more populous areas than I do, with way more deer. And here in northern Wisconsin, sometimes, go 3, 4 days without seeing a deer, and I'm sure you got the same thing sometimes up in Ontario, and but then when you finally do get one, or you get the chance, that's what you live for. That's what makes it all worthwhile. And musky fishing can be, you know, I once went 8 days in a row without a fish in the boat, and it was just, I'm like, what am I doing here? And actually, that was before a an episode of Musky Hunter TV with Jim. And in fact, I called Jim. He was on his way up, and I called him. I said, Jim, I got nothing. We had northeast winds for 8 days in a row, and all I had was a hunch. And we ended up putting together. He said, I'm coming. We got to power through it, and we ended up putting together a shoot that we have 9 fish in 3 days, or 2.5 days, or whatever it was. And a good thing most of them were caught in low light, because that northeast wind had kind of packed all the ciscos into the southwest corner of a lake. And it was like every muskie, it pushed all the plankton there, all the ciscos were there, almost all the muskies in the lake seemed to be there, and we just kind of went around in a 200-yard circle. And it's a good thing that was low light, because otherwise people would have thought, well, you're going around in a 200-yard circle catching all these fish. We were. That made it all worthwhile. 8 days of struggle, and then we put together a great TV show. That was worth it then. So yeah, a deer hunter or a moose hunter, you go out there and you try and you try and you try and try, and all of a sudden it comes together. Well, yeah, those 3 or 4 days of nothing kind of get forgotten, because now you've got something tangible in front of you or in the back of your pickup truck. And with musky fishing, now you've got something tangible in your net, and all that effort is worthwhile. And if you understand that, as a deer hunter, you can certainly transition into musky fishing very easily.
Yeah, I think a lot of today's musky hunter generation, we have these super high expectations that we put on ourselves, and social media puts on us, that you have to catch every time out. And I'm guilty of that. Dave and I fish cedar, we fish Indian Lake chain, we fish eagle. We're expecting ourselves to catch 1 to 3 fish every time out, and it's just not fair, and it's not realistic. But you go a couple years where you're averaging a fish or two every trip, and you feel great. You feel like, I got this figured out. And last year it was tough everywhere. And
Mm.
when I, was looking back at our videos, and I'm like, skunk, 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 and you can't put videos together where you got no fish. I mean, you can make something out of a follow, but it just made me realize that, you know what, the good years are going to be good, the bad years are going to be bad, but we still turned it around last year. And on what I would consider a down year for us, we did pretty good. We powered through, like you said, and we were able to put stuff together. And for me, for Dave, for a lot of our kind of core group of people that I fish with, we started going back to classic lures, classic patterns, almost that keep it simple, stupid idea of get back to the basics. And one of the lures, and this is just an unashamed plug for Suic, was we went back to just a 9 and 10 inch Suic. And this is my original silver jailbird. This is the
Mhm.
one that I've had just so much success with over the years. I got Mike to do a rerun of that color because it was discontinued. Super popular. My wife sold them at her shop. A lot of people, reached out, hey, we want that silver jailbird. And for us, it was getting back to a simpler way of fishing. Yeah, we got the electronics, and I do use forward facing sonar. We don't sharpshoot, it's part of what we do. But getting back to, smaller bucktails was something that was good for us. Rubber, obviously, like that's a staple up here on the Shield,
Mhm.
but back to the basic kind of stuff of bulldogs, medusas, tubes, suics, and I just started to see across social media this resurgence in a lure like a Suic thriller. You've been with Suic for a long time. You've seen them, you know, come and go through the industry. What do you see right now with a company like Suic, who they've been there since day one in musky fishing, and obviously they've had periods of popularity, downturns. Am I correct in saying that it looks like, that's another company that people are gravitating towards, like that classic style of lure again?
Well, they should. I mean, that lure's been around since 1939, and you've seen it. The muskies sometimes act like they've never seen the bait before, and they just they commit suicide with it. And as I said, it's can't miss TV when they hit it too. It's a thrill a minute when they come up with their mouth open and pick it off just underneath the surface. If you're looking somewhere else, you feel cheated because you missed that strike. That strike is so cool to watch. That the muskie's got a mouthful of teeth. It comes out of nowhere, and now it's got your bait, and that's just so cool. And so the visual aspect of catching it is probably on par or almost as good as a topwater catch. So, I muskie fishermen are always looking for that that magic lure. And I fished muskies for 45 years, and the only magic lures I ever seen was when the grandma bait first came out. A 6-inch grandma bait twitched up here in northern Wisconsin. Good God, those fish had never seen that. They thought they were eating a little 6-inch perch, and they were just all over it. But those were, it's northern Wisconsin, and that was 35 years ago. Those were smaller fish. Then the cowgirl came out, and that was, good Lord, that cowgirl. The numbers of 50-inch fish that got caught on the double cowgirl over the years, and it's still a good bait. Um, you know, those are the only baits that I've ever seen that were close to magic. And it a good bait though, like a Suic, a top raider, a tallywhacker, a Meps, they still catch fish, and people are always looking for something better, looking for something different. And I've always maintained that why don't you just take the lures you've got and learn how to fish them right? You said that I fish a Suic a little bit differently than you do. I'm not saying the way I fish a Suic is the right way to do it, because a musky fisherman, the way they fish a bait, they're the magician in many cases. You throw a bulldog, how are you going to fish that bulldog? The way you fish it today, maybe it works today, but doesn't tomorrow. Or you fish it differently than I do, but you catch fish, I catch fish. The musky fisherman is the magician. And I've always maintained, take the lures you got, and maybe some of the lure companies don't want me to say this, but take the lures you got and learn how to fish them. If gliders are kind of getting popular again, and 25 years ago, a glider, like when the Hughes River was out, gliders were everybody had to have every last glider that came out, trying to find again the magic bait.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always maintained, like with gliders, get a hellhound, get a phantom, get one that works, learn how to use it, and fish it. And if you can't catch one on a hellhound, they aren't going to bite on a glider today. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so maybe my lure selection is a little boring, but I know how to use the baits I've got. And
Yeah.
also going back, you had mentioned that you expected to catch a fish. And I think that's something, though, you got to have it. Because if you go out and don't expect to catch a fish today, what's going to happen to your technique? What's going to happen to your positive mojo? As you're on the water, you can't not think you're going to catch a fish. I think I'm going to catch a fish on every cast. Now, I know it's not going to happen, but if you aren't imparting a little extra speed to that bucktail, if you aren't adding that little pause to a minnow bait, if you aren't letting that Suic, give it a couple little twitches and then let it rise to the surface, right in that right spot, if you just kind of overlook that, no, you're out of the game at that point. You got to have that mindset going in that you're going to catch a fish today. Don't know when it's going to be, and you probably aren't going to, but you got to have the mindset you're going to catch a fish.
That's yes, that's really cool to hear from somebody like you because we always go into a day expecting something to happen. And a friend of ours, somebody we know, Johnny Lubera from Southern Ontario, Lebowski Lures, he always had this saying, positive musky vibes in the boat. And that's a
Mhm.
common thing. And I think that's so important. And I tell my guests in the boat, I'm just like, sometimes you just got to stick with it. Something's going to happen today. You have to be prepared. You have to just keep sticking with it. And the days where the guide catches a fish or two from the back of the boat and the two guests at the front miss the fish, that probably comes down to you were better prepared at the back of the boat mentally and you didn't give up on a cast prematurely. And I've seen that a lot in my short guiding career. I only take, 10, 12 days a year. I'm busy with my full-time career, but in the little bit that I guide, I see so many people, I'm getting tired. I'm not going to put everything into this cast, to your point there, Steve. And that's when they have that big fish up. And one of my friends that's on here, James, he had some shots at fish with me. His wife had some shots at fish. And not that James was getting tired, he wasn't prepared to continually put in every single cast. And you know as well as I do, Steve, that that difference between success and failure in musky fishing is it's sometimes it's fractions of an inch. and
Mhm.
and not just measurements but mentally. And how do you stay prepared when you're on the water to be mentally prepared every single day? And you fish a lot up in Canada, or you have in the past. I don't know if you do still, but I know you have in the past. When you come to places like Lake of the Woods where it can be different every year, how do you stay mentally focused for a trip like that?
Well, if I'm going to Canada, being mentally focused isn't hard because I've had so many good times out there. I spend you asked about that earlier. I spend typically 3 weeks a year in Canada now. Um, I can't wait to get there, quite frankly. And I've got a lot of experience on a lot of the lakes up there. Um, I kind of know what's going to, or what probably is going to be the ticket this year, or is going to be the ticket because the conditions are such. I maintain a musky log. We talked about it in Musky Hunter forever.
Mhm.
Write down all the details of all the fish you catch. Well, I still do that. I can tell you exactly how many. If I went back and looked and turned on my other computer, how many muskies I've caught or had in the boat, I should say, since 1994. I've got every single one: date, water temperature, time, lure, you name it. I got it. And so when I go back to say Lake of the Woods, and I'm going there in July, well, I know it's going to be a bucktail topwater. If we get a cool day, it's going to be minnow baits. If it gets flat calm, it probably be minnow baits and suics. I know what's going to happen. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, are they going to be on weeds, going to be on rocks? And you just hit the spots, go out in the morning, hit your spots on your milk run of previous spots that you fished before, and just kind of just start putting it together. And I always look to wind first because you're going to have more wind areas than you're going to have current areas. But wind is current; it's water movement, and I always look to that. And then every now and then you got to, especially if you're not doing well, you've got to try something different. Like, okay, well, the wind isn't working today. Well, let's go try some sand beaches and get out of the wind, see if that works. And you just keep trying that kind of stuff, and you work with your partners. You got to work with your partners. It's not you against your partner when you're fishing. It's you working with your partner trying to catch fish. Because if you and your partner work together, you catch more fish. The two of you are going to catch more fish over the course of the week. Um, you're still, if you got the same partner and you fish with them long enough, you're still going to have those weeks you outfish him or he outfishes you. That's just the way it is. That's the sport.
Mhm.
If you let that bother you, well, you should probably do something else. But work with your partner. Um, in fact, with the guys that I fish with a lot, just to be fair, if we go up there and it's a bucktail bite, I wouldn't want to be fishing behind me throwing a bucktail in the front of the boat. So what we do, and this is to be fair, is that the two guys that spend the most time with up, in Canada, we will switch off running the boat on different spots. And if we're taking my boat, well, I'm used to my boat. My boat is typically bigger than theirs. Um, I'm going to run it a little faster. I'll run it a little tighter to structure. They aren't so familiar with my boat. We found that they will run it a little further off structure and a little bit more slowly because they don't want to bang my boat into a rock. Um, and what we found is if we are moving fish when I'm running the boat, well, we got to speed up and we got to get tighter to structure, or I should say, and vice versa. If we're moving fish when they're running the boat, well, we got to slow down and maybe come off the structure a little bit more. And also switching up on spots when you're casting. We always have the guy in the bow casting what we perceive to be the lure, the hot lure. Um, is it a silver black meps? Okay. If we think that's the bait that is moving the most fish, the guy in the bow has got that. Guy number two is going to throw something that has to be complementary of the first bait, meaning it can be fished as quickly as that, big extreme. You can't have the guy in the front throwing a bucktail and the guy in the back throwing a creeper. Not going to work.
Yep.
But you can fish a minnow bait almost as fast as you can a bucktail. So that we switch off spots. One of us is throwing a bucktail in the front or whatever we perceive to be the hot bait. Next guy is throwing the suic, the topwater, the minnow bait, maybe a different colored bucktail, maybe a different size bucktail, different blade style, trying to dial in. And pretty soon we might find a different hot bait. We might find, okay, well, if they aren't going to eat this coming through, they're going to eat this. And now we've got that. And the same thing goes to when you've got a fish in a figure eight. Buddy's got a fish coming in a figure eight, get your lure out of there. Mm-hmm. You're not going to don't try to compete with him, and confuse that fish. Just get your lure out of there. Turn the rod over to the side, crank it, get it out of there. Sometimes I'm sure you've had it where you've got two fish in there and you both got to figure eight it. Okay, fine. But that's still rare. Get your lure out of there and then start watching to see what is going on with his fish. Because as he's figure eighting that fish, you're going to have sky conditions. The sun's going to be different. Maybe the waves break differently. He can't see the fish all the time, but you can see it when he's not from the back of the boat. And you talk back and forth. It might be speed up. He likes that, or slow down, or go deep, or don't go deep. You might hit him with a rod tip. Talk back and forth. Work together, yep. And ultimately you catch more fish, and you also make better friends.
That was a 5 or 6 minute masterclass right there, Steve. There's so much in there. I totally agree. You have to work with your partner in the boat. Dave and I, we work so well together. We can work almost non-verbally because we've spent so much time together. And when my brother-in-law Richard comes and fishes with us, if one of us hooks a fish, he just kind of gets out of the way because we have a routine. We know where we're going to try and be in the boat. And that just speaks to being, fishing with partners. And I do think it's so important to fish to each other's strength, understand what lures each person's using. Again, to your point, if Dave's throwing a fast bucktail at the front, I can't be trying to throw a walk the dog topwater at the back. It's just not going to work. So you have to work together, and you only have to look on YouTube a little wee bit and you start to see people that bring a fish in at the front of the boat, the middle guy's right there. And now you got two guys figure eighting one fish. And you just look at yourself and you're like, what are these guys doing? And they may get lucky and catch that fish and not learn that lesson. But too often you see those, what we would call rookie mistakes. And it's unfortunate that some people don't learn from those, but there's so much you said there about working with your partner, talking, and a quick story on a suic again. Dave and I were fishing one of our local lakes here, and we had I can't remember what the setup was, but it was very windy, and we went out. We ended up getting 5 kind of a half day in the morning, but we're fishing along a rock wall. Dave was at the front, and the fish were sitting suspended off of this rock wall. Dave was throwing a suic, and I was throwing something probably like a supermodel or like a big bucktail that I could just slow roll in and try and keep it down in the water column. And I'm watching these fish follow Dave in, but because the waves were pushing in towards the front of the boat, by the time his suic would come in, it would be almost kind of behind him. And I could see, and I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, twitch, twitch. No, pause, pause, pause. Yeah, one more twitch. And then I'm like, you got it. But because of the waves, he didn't feel it. And I'm like, set the hook. And he sets the hook on it. And it was like I give him the play by play through the whole thing because he couldn't see it. And it's again, it's exactly what you said, just working together with, with your partner, with the other people in the boat. And, some of the guys that I got, on here watching tonight, I fished with, and clear communication is so important. And like I'm big on try and fight the fish where you are. And I'm gonna your recent Suic video, you did walk that fish around, but that fish put up a
I
big
had to.
yeah, it put up a big tussle there. And I think you did it exactly right. You weren't doing it for show. That's something else I see on YouTube a lot is guys, they get a fish and they just go crazy and they walk it around the boat and they end up right back in the same spot. The net man doesn't know what to do. To me, it seems uncoordinated. I think there's right ways and wrong ways of doing stuff, and never discount how important a net man is until you start solo fishing. I've done quite a bit of it. You have more disasters than you care to talk about solo fishing, but understand that the net man may or may not make a mistake, and you pray to God it's not going to be a fish of a lifetime. I'm sure some people have lost a fish of a lifetime in a net job, but don't be upset. Again, it's working together. What's your net disaster story now that we're right there, Steve?
Well, two of them. I was just thinking about this earlier. Uh, First big fish I ever hooked. Um, Buddy fishing with me, he says, "You want to net it?" And I said, "No, it's hooked really well. I'm enjoying this. I'm going to fight him a little bit." And let him take a little line. And the next thing I knew, I didn't have the fish on anymore. And I realized you got to net them at the earliest opportunity. And so that, that wasn't necessarily a net disaster, but it would have been my first big fish ever. But I had one guiding a couple of years ago, and it, I've learned so much from just watching video, watching my own video of netting fish. Even when the longer rods came out, I remember when St. Croix first came out with a 7-foot rod, and it was like, oh, these are awesome. Are they going to sell though? Well, now, I don't have a 7-foot rod anymore in the boat. And I learned just by netting fish with a longer rod, somebody would bring a fish up and then stand there with holding the rod. And if you got a 7.5, 8-foot, 9-foot rod, and they're just not stepping back, leading the fish into the net, well, you can't reach it with the net. And even if you could reach it, you can't move that net when you're extended out like that, move it quickly enough to get the fish. So we learned you have to step back and try to get the fish's head up. You kind of lift the rod up and then pull it back in. Net disaster 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Fishing with a client, hooked a musky, would have been his best fish ever, 47, 48 incher on a triple D big heavy fish out over open water. And he panicked. That's the only thing I can say is, he put the screws to that fish, and big fish like that, if you can get the net underneath it before it knows what's going on, that's great. But this fish knew what was going on because he just put the screws to it, and then I grabbed the net. I got up front with them. I got down on one knee. I was ready to net, and I had the net right next to the water. And the next thing I knew, the fish was tangled on the outside of the net, and I'm holding the net bag. I hadn't even made an attempt to net the fish, and it just had one tail hook in its mouth, and it went like that. And it was gone. And it got real quiet in the boat, as you can imagine. And I said, guys, I said, I honestly don't know what happened. I said, I didn't make a move for the fish. It was getting dark too. I couldn't see it that well, dark water lake, and couldn't see the fish that well. And but I didn't make a move for it, and yet it got tangled in the net. And I told him, I said, look, it's on me. I'm your guide. I ultimately, it's my job to get the fish in the net, but I don't know what happened. And I said, thank God I got a GoPro running, because I said, if I see something that exonerates me at the end of the night, or at least that's what I'm thinking, I'll at least be able to sleep tonight. And what happened was he panicked, tried to, he horsed that fish, and the fish didn't like to do that. I could see that already. But then he just took the rod and just pulled it straight back like this and pulled that fish into the net before I even had an opportunity to make a move with the net to get the fish. And you probably hear it in my videos all the time. If I'm fishing with Scott and Musky on, I just take your time, rod up, take your time, and then you'll get the head up as I'm netting. Because if the fish has got its head down, that's a disaster waiting to happen too. Because if the head's down, they can go down pretty darn quickly. They'll go in the direction their head's aimed. And if the head's up, you can get the net underneath. Now you've got it. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I have
there.
I have the exact opposite scenario. I was fishing with a couple older fellas, and I hooked into a low 40s tiger, and they're always aggressive. Caught him on a tube way out from the boat. He was staying low. He come up, okay, it's tiger, got the net, and I walked to the front of the boat. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna slowly bring him up to you. And he brought the net down and he stabbed at the fish with the net hoop pretty much right at water level. And I did have the head up, but they just collided. And now this tiger's caught on the outside of the hoop. And that split second lasted 35 minutes.
Mhm.
And I was just like, I threw my rod down. I was like, give me the net. And I just rolled the net over. I got it in kind of a
Yep.
flat bag, rolled it in, and great. We got it unhooked, and I threw the lure on, took a quick picture, and I looked over. I'm like, where is my rod? Like my tube's right here. I look over the side and my chaos tackle rod's floating, thankfully, on the other side. So we've all been in those. I do want to just, as we kind of start to wrap this up, I want to give a huge shout out to my 13-year-old daughter. She was fishing with me last summer, and I had her throwing a suic. She had 2 or 3 fish up at the boat, but it was classic bluebird flat calm conditions.
Mhm.
She stuck with it. She nearly caught one. I caught a nice tiger on a pit bull, and it hit right at the boat, like one of those classic boat side, just come out of nowhere and inhale a bulldog. I let it run. I said, Kenzie, grab the net. She's been in the boat a lot, so she knows the routines. Of course, the net's a little heavy for her. She actually got the net down, and the tiger, as soon as it seen the net, it just turned. It wanted to run, stayed out of the net. We rolled it around, and on the video, she's got the net like perfect, perfect 45. I slide that fish in. I did grab the net handle just to be sure she was going to get it. We got it, and that was probably, one of my most cherished moments of last year
Oh yeah.
was fishing with my daughter. The only thing better there would have been me sliding the net under her fish, but that will come. She's caught a really big tiger with us before. So even though there's disasters, there's so many amazing stories of, sliding the net under a first muskie for someone, or the
Yep.
biggest muskie. And, when my wife got her 52 and a quarter, 52 and a half on cedar, and Dave put the net under it on a sucker, we didn't know it was that big in that moment. And then when I looked into that bag, I was like, yeah, this is a good one. It's those moments that you just if you could write a book about just those moments, it would be just a bestseller, but it just sometimes those moments only work for, those people in the boat at that
Mhm.
time.
Yeah,
You know,
trying to convey that emotion and that feeling when it happens. It's tough to do. And maybe that's why video is replacing print right now because people can see you get excited when that fish hits the bag, and maybe hopefully they get caught up in that right alongside of you.
yeah, for sure. Steve, what do you have exciting on the horizon? What will you be at any of the remaining couple shows? And what is next for you? What are what's on your agenda for this coming season?
Um, Hopefully more muskies than last year. Um, I had a better season in northern Wisconsin than I'd had for a couple of years. Um, and yet those 3 trips to Canada were dreadful. If it wasn't for the big fish we caught, we got a couple of big fish on each of the trips, and those were the trip makers. But the numbers, goodness gracious, where they were, I don't know. We could probably do a whole podcast going, what happened last year. I don't know. Um, but so far as what I'm going to do this year, just looking forward to having a good time with a lot of good friends, and a lot of customers who have become friends. Just gotta, you were talking earlier about how anybody can make music. Um, I got 2 guys that we do opening day of muskie season together. It's Saturday of Memorial Day weekend here in the States every year, and we fish together and we go. We might go to some little pothole lake with my little boat, or we might go to a big lake. It just depends, and we always do shore lunch and just have a good time. And you better check your ego at the door because you're going to pick on each other constantly. And he put together a couple of songs with an artificial intelligence app. I think it was called Sunu or something to that effect. And they were actually pretty good. And he kind of wrote, you there's a lot of people who do poetry. Jim and I hated poetry because it usually was so corny. And we'd get a poem a month. Somebody'd send in a poem about musky fish and hope we'd print it, and we just never printed them. We hated them because they were corny. Well, Mike took this corny this corny poem, I guess, that he wrote and put it to music with this artificial intelligence app, and it's pretty darn good. He had one with a hard rock beat and one with a country beat, and it had a couple, some of the funnier moments we've had. He worked in, my little boat was Tom Gelb's boat. I inherited that when Tom passed, and I renovated the boat best I could. But it's fun for fishing those little bitty lakes. The ones that I could probably get my Vexus into, but without a tow truck, I wouldn't get it out. Um, but that little one I can get them into because it doesn't weigh anything. And yeah, he even referenced Tom's boat in the country version, which was pretty cool. So so I guess anybody can make music.
That's awesome. When this will bring it full circle to back to when I just talked with Joe and we had to nerd out on guitars and amplifiers for a few minutes at the end. When I had our little garage band going, me and my buddies wrote a few songs, and one of our songs that I wrote, we played at every show we went to, and it became a local known song. People expected us to play it, and that was always a really cool feeling for me. It was something that I wrote, and I get a similar feeling when I put together a video or do something like this, talk to guys like you and Jim and Joe. You have a feeling of accomplishment, and I can't thank you enough for doing this. This has truly been never meet your heroes for me, talking to you, Steve, or you, Joe, and Jim from the original, like what I consider that classic period of Muskie Hunter. just it's been fun for me. It's been a bucket list kind of thing for me to just check off. I hope to, touch base with you again in the future. And if you're ever up in my neck of the woods, I'd love to, hook up with you here. If you could tell our viewers three lures from your box to bring up to Canada, name them, and you don't even have to say the colors. If the color's important, say it. If not, what are three lures that you have to bring to Shield Lakes?
Okay, well, first would be, going back for almost 20 years now, double cowgirl, double black blades, the black nickel blades with a black hollow form tail. That's my number one color. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ontario, it always has been. Um, I always referred to that as ghost when we came up with that color. Um, my thinking was, you could sense it, you knew it was there, but you couldn't see it, or the fish couldn't. At least they couldn't see it until it was too late. And then we're fishing with Herbeck on Eagle Lake like 2 years later, and he's got this secret color, and I'm not going to show you because I don't want my guides to know about it. And oh yeah, come on, Herbie, let's see what it is. And he pulls the thing out, and he's calling it smoke. It was the same doggone color. I'm like, are you kidding? So there's that. Obviously a 10-inch suet, orange belly. I don't care what your favorite color is on the sides, but in Canada, it's got to have that orange belly. And then, boy, limit it to three. So much, yeah, orange belly. There you go. So much of so much of Canada is fishing bucktails, and if they aren't going to hit the cowgirl, downsizing usually works. And a MEPS, that double blade musky flashaboo, is just a slightly smaller version, and I catch a lot of big fish on that almost every year. Last year I didn't because I didn't catch a lot of big fish in Canada, but most years I do. And that either following in the number 2 spot behind the cowgirl, or sometimes it takes precedence over the cowgirl up in the front, just catches fish. But I can't limit it to 3. We got to have a middle bait in there, like a slammer or a shallow raider, the 7-8 inch models. Twitching those over cabbage when it's sunny and flat, calm, is going to save your day. One of your viewers just popped up, bucktail and a suet. Well, yeah. They work.
Yeah.
Certainly a middle bait, and then of course you got to have a top water. It's and a prop bait, whatever your favorite prop bait is. Every year this fish seem to show a preference. At least I think so. Might be a pacemaker, might be a Dr. Evil, might be a top raider, might be a fat bee. Whatever your favorite prop bait is, because you got to cover water. Especially if you're there in summer, you got to think about covering water. Fish are usually revved up. Cover water, bucktail top water, bucktail middle bait, bucktail suet. It's going to get the job done.
Yep. And to the MEPS side of it, one of my buddies, Mark McDermott, if he's watching or he'll be listening, he came up a few years ago, stayed at one of my buddies' camps, actually on Indian Lake Chain, and he was using a little MEPS Marabou with like, I think a double 8 or maybe even 7s. They were pretty small, black on black, and he was crushing on it. He said it was one of his best lures back home in Wisconsin. It's still in my box actually because he either took it off or I stole it. I'm not sure which, but it's in my box, and I always look at that one as like I knew that one had some mojo, so I never really put it away. It's always right there. And when you're talking MEPS, we just did a recent video talking about smaller bucktails, like the little MEPS number 5, the little musky killers, like all those little ones up here. You can't overlook those small baits year round. They will work everywhere. And we're guilty of not using them as much as we probably should. So there's a place for those smaller baits up here as well. So luckily I have all 3 or all 4 of the ones that you were just mentioning there, and probably more, but I just want to say thank you. I hope that you have an amazing Muskie season this year. I hope that all of our viewers have a better season because last year was tough. It was tough everywhere. That I don't know. I don't know what history is going to look back on and say what the big issue was there. I don't know that anybody truly knows that it was across the Midwest and Canada. Everybody was feeling the same things. But this year, we're going to get out here. Hopefully, it's going to be a better year for everybody. I wish you the best of luck. And I look forward to having you on again. And I'm sure my viewers will as well, Steve. So thank you so much.
Hey, Glenn, it was a blast. I appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, guys, that is another edition of 54 or more minutes with one of my heroes and truly a legend, a gentleman of the sport, Steve Heiting. Thank you so much. Continue, best wishes and good luck this year. And for everybody that's watching, thank you guys so much. We'll see you in another edition.